Well, hello, I'm Robert Vejnar, and I'm the archivist for the Holston Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church. And we're today here in the Bishop Earl Gladstone Hunt Jr. Research Room at Emory Henry. Bishop Hunt was president of Emory Henry from 1956 to 1964, and he was instrumental in bringing the Holston Conference archives to Emory Henry College in 1961. And then when this library was constructed in 1968, then the archives were moved into this room. Today, the books that you see here on the shelf are all part of Bishop Hunt's collection. The conference's archives date back to 1824, and we do have the very first conference minutes that are recorded. These are the actual minutes, the very first conference that took place November 27th, 1824. A lot different than what we would think of today as far as recording minutes. There were 11 ministers who were present at the time. This is the beginnings of Holston. In 1824, Holston was split off from the Tennessee Conference, or what was called the Tennessee Conference, and Holston has been in existence ever since 1824. So we have multiple volumes of these that go through the late 19th century. One of the more interesting ones, though, is in 1832. What I'm holding here is the equivalent of like 10 to 15 years worth of modern conference journals that are much thicker than this. But in 1832, when the annual conference met in what's now Wytheville, Virginia, Bishop John Emory presided that year, and here we have the only signature that I know of John Emory. The conference's collections just aren't old manuscript minutes. We also have photographs of ministers, churches from the late 19th century, early 20th century. We have various collections from 19th century ministers. One of those is Robert Sheffey. Robert Sheffey was an itinerant evangelist here in this area in the late 19th century. And that's one of his photos. I believe he passed away in 1902 or so. But we have his letters, his Bible is here. We also have some of the very first Holston Conference newspapers. Volume 1, Issue 1 of the Holston Methodist, published in Morristown, Tennessee. It went out every Saturday. This very first issue was published March the 2nd of 1872. And we have about 14 years worth of these early conference newspapers, which are a great source for studying the history of Holston in the late 19th century. Materials related to some of the other branches of Methodism that were in this area operating in the late 19th and early 20th century. One of those is the East Tennessee Conference of the United Brethren in Christ. In this volume, we actually have the very first minutes of the United Brethren in Christ, which met in Otterbein Chapel, Greene County, Tennessee, November 22nd of 1866. We also have collections that date to the early 20th century. And one of the more interesting ones that came in the last year was a collection put together by the Reverend Sherman Starling. And he gave the Holston Conference his collection of sermons and also his collection of the Tennessee Booster, which was the weekly newspaper, the conference paper for the Evangelical United Brethren Church. This, of course, first one isn't in the greatest of shape, but these are extremely rare. Doing a search on the national catalog, I found no other library in the United States that has these, and Holston Conference, of course, does have them. But people can come to the archives to research not only family history, they can also come here to work on or study their church's history. And we're open Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. My email address is rjvejnar@ehc.edu. We're here to help the folks in Holston study their history and to be a ministry of memory.
The Thomas Amy House near Rogersville was built around 1781. Bishop Asbury stayed here on 4 occasions in the spring of 1790 while making plans to take Methodism into Kentucky. Amy was a patriot who helped the colonies gain independence, and his frontier outposts secured many a weary traveler in the wilderness that was East Tennessee. The house has been fully restored by Jake and Wendy Jacobs, Amy descendants. The Jacobs family has also opened a first-class restaurant on the property. It's called the Amy Mill Eatery and overlooks the original mill site and dam. The Henry Ernest family, a pioneer Methodist family, arrived in Greene County in 1779. The Ford House was completed in 1782. The Ernest family were often visited by Bishop Asbury, and a Methodist society was organized in 1790. Henry Ernest provided the land for construction of the Ebenezer Methodist Church. The present building dates to 1899 and is the third to occupy the same foundation. Asbury records in his journal that he preached to some 200 people at Ernest on April 5, 1793. Bishop Asbury dedicated the church on April 27, 1795, during the session of the Western Conference meeting at Ebenezer. Ebenezer hosted annual conference several times. The 1822 conference was called the conference by many people in the area because of 39 received on trial and because of great numbers attending to hear the preaching, which left a very favorable impression of Methodism. The Commission on Archives and History recommends that these be designated as official historic sites in Holston Conference.